In today's video, we have the latest NHL trade talk around a few teams, including the Toronto Maple Leafs, Anaheim Ducks, and of course the Detroit Red Wings as well. We also have some news out of Vancouver with expecting some buyouts this coming offseason, news from the NHL waiver wire, and a big update from the 2023 World Junior Championships. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover in today's video, but before we jump into the news, I do want to take another moment to look back on this day in hockey history. On this day back in 1984, all those years ago, I would have been a wee 5 years old. All three Stastny brothers playing for the Quebec Nordiques hockey team scored a goal versus the Boston Bruins. That's something that's pretty rare. You don't see a whole lot. You rarely see three players of brothers in the NHL, let alone all in the same club. Of course, you got Peter Stastny, Anton Stastny, and Marian Stastny all ended up with the Nordiques, all scored in the same game. Pretty rare. We have seen since then cases of two brothers playing together, but three is rare. Now, I guess with Luke Hughes of the United States national junior team, of course, the University of Michigan getting ready to join the New Jersey Devils at the end of his college season. It'll be interesting. He'll be on the same team, of course, as his brother Jack. Quinn Hughes is in the NHL, of course, in Vancouver. It's the first time in a while that at least I can recall having three siblings all in the NHL all at the same time, and all fairly high-profile players too. It'd be interesting to see if they ever end up playing all together. Lots of other brother sets across the league, but I believe that's the only one that will be three once Luke makes the official jump. But those were fun days back in the 80s when we still had the Nordiques, and I certainly hope one day we see them again. Quick update from the NHL waiver wire. The Winnipeg Jets have placed Michael Eisman on waivers. He's appeared in 19 games this year and put up 5 points. I wonder if they're getting ready to get back some players because they do have a lot of injuries they're dealing with right now, and things are progressing and looking positive to get some players coming back. They do have Blake Wheeler returning to practice here recently with no restrictions on his jersey color, so he's wearing a regular jersey, so not a no-contact situation. Apparently Nick Ehlers, Cole Perfetti, and Nate Schmidt are all getting close as well. So I guess we'll have to wait for further updates from the Jets, but I would suspect somebody is getting back into the lineup here. A couple other injury updates. We had talked yesterday about the Boston Bruins, and of course how they had lost Jake Debrusk, unfortunately, after the Winter Classic in a game where he was a big contributor to the Bruins defeating the Penguins in the Outdoor Classic game. Ended up wearing a walking boot. We knew he was hurt. There was reports of a fractured fibula. There's some different reports today, so I don't know if we can 100% for sure say that's the injury, but regardless of what it is, it appears it might even be more than one thing he's dealing with. But they have placed him on long-term injury reserve. So that's a new development, which keeps him out of action for at least 4 weeks. So he's going to miss around 14 games. So that's unfortunate for him. He's having a good season. A big part of the Bruins' success. But of course, Boston has done nothing but deal with adversity all year. So I'll be surprised if they're anything but fine coming through this. Of course, it's unfortunate, though, for him having such a good year. Brendan Gallagher is going to miss tonight's game as well. Apparently, he was hurt in practice and won't be playing for the Montreal Canadiens on tonight's NHL action. No quite clear, indication of exactly how long he's going to be out, but he is going to be out tonight. And it looks like they might be making Mike Hoffman a healthy scratch in Montreal as well. Certainly lots of things not really going right there. There's also a big expectation from the Montreal Canadiens organization from different media, including Darren Dreger of TSN, saying that he fully expects here probably within the next week, that we're going to see the Montreal Canadiens likely take first overall pick Jerard Slafkovsky and send him down to the American Hockey League into Belleville. He's not far off from having enough games played this season that'll count as an accrued season towards him becoming an unrestricted free agent. So it makes sense if they don't feel like he's really getting the best experience right now, that it's something that he should go down. I mean, certainly his scoring has been down. To me, I've seen enough Habs games this year. In the beginning, I wasn't sure if he was ready or not. Like at the beginning of the season, I was like, okay, I don't know that he's ready. Maybe they should send him down. But then things got better. And I'm like, okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe he seemed to be doing well there for a bit, but then it really kind of slacked off, and his scoring touch has been down. Of course, the whole team has struggled mightily, which is not playing a good positive role in him not getting a lot of offense and points and things like that as well. Not getting the best line mates to play with. I think that's best suited for him. So I think it's probably best he go down and play with some of the other prospects. He's probably not going to be the only one sent down. Expectation is we'll see guys like Morgan Barron and Anthony Richard go back probably as well. They have a bunch of veterans, as we know, that they want to move on from, and they need to give them as much opportunity as well to be able to showcase them so they can hopefully move them by the deadline. So all those things playing a role in their decisions, but do expect first overall pick Slafkovsky likely gets demoted to the American Hockey League. If these reports are accurate, probably within the next few days or within the next week before he plays too many more games and the status changes on his accrued season. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have a pretty significant update from the World Junior Championships. Of course, yesterday was the semifinals, and we had some really fantastic hockey action to watch. We had the first game of the day was Team Sweden against Team Czechia. Czechia pulls off the stunning victory. Sweden was looking like they were going to win. It was a really low-scoring, tight-checking affair. Sweden took a 1-0 lead late into the third, and of course, Czechia again pulled off a surprise and tied it up, sent it to overtime. And Sabres forward Jerard Fagerberg ended up getting the winner. It was a complete collapse by Sweden. I mean, not that they had a big lead or anything, but they certainly had control. I think they were in well positioned to hang on, and they couldn't get it done. Overtime was, it's 3-on-3 in this part of the tournament. And the only game that you're not going to see the 3-on-3 is the gold medal game, which will go later tonight, which features Canada now against Czechia, because Canada beat the U.S. yesterday as well. But otherwise, you're getting those 3-on-3, and that can be pretty wild. And Kulich pulls off the win for Czechia, who's just seems like a team of destiny in this tournament, a team of fate. They certainly, I think a lot of teams underestimated them. So they pull off that late comeback win to get the overtime victory over Sweden. Canada ended up defeating the United States 6-2. The U.S. got off to a hot start. The first 8-9 minutes, it was all United States. Logan Cooley scored early. They get a second one. It was 2-0. Things were not looking good for Canada. U.S. was dominating on face-offs. And so just the overall play of the shots were certainly lopsided for that first half of the first period. But finally, Canada got their act together, started playing a little bit better. Connor Bedard got the first goal, gets them on the score sheet, made it 2-1. They then got it tied up 2-2. And then from there, a lot of, I guess, some people might call it controversial. I don't. I really don't think this is the case. But the United States did end up having 2 disallowed goals due to goaltender interference. The first goal, I will say that one was a little bit more debatable. When I first seen it happen live, I said, okay, 50-50. I wasn't sure if it was going to count or come back. I wasn't automatically thinking it was going to be disallowed. Basically, the puck was shot at the net. Puck's in the crease. The American player turns around, has his basically almost like his butt in the goalie's face, and ends up but he was in the crease, and he did inhibit the goalie from moving. Some say the Canadian defender, Olen Zellweger, shoved him in. There was a little bit of a shove from the defenseman, but to me, he didn't shove him into the goalie. He shoved him more like trying to get him out of the crease, but there was contact with the Canadian defenseman, the goaltender. The American player did get it in the net, but it didn't. I believe it was Jackson Blake that put it in. But at the end of the day, it was no goal, and that was the ruling. Now, like I said, I wasn't sure what to think of that. I seen the reaction online by a lot of American fans was pretty much that it was a brutal call. And I wasn't completely in disagreement. I was a little bit surprised, but you got to remember the international rules are completely different, very different from the NHL. They are very much, if there's any goaltender contact, when it comes to other major penalties, contact with the head, they take it way more seriously. They really protect players' heads, health, and goaltending. And that's just the way it is. It's cut and dry. There's contact, you're in the crease, you don't belong there. It's going to likely get called back. And that's what happened here. Now, I will say, though, after watching, tons of NHL hockey over the years, it does surprise me in a way that they didn't allow that one. But still, at the end of the day, it is what it is. The United States' second disallowed goal, to me, was pretty blatant, cut and dry. There's no way anybody should be upset or really disputing that one. The puck was frozen under the goalie's pad. He had it probably for a good 2-3 seconds, and then he got basically, shoved into the net. American player got a stick under there and pushed him in. I mean, that's a classic case of goaltender interference. You can't do that. It's not a goal. So I don't know why American people or anybody, any of them, regardless of where you're from, if you thought that was a bad call, you need to look at the rules. I mean, it's pretty simple in my opinion. So ultimately, the United States had 2 goals overturned. It really seemed to impact them and how they played Canada, really dominated the rest of the game, in my opinion. The U.S. did have their chances, but goalie Thomas Milic played a really solid game. Joshua Waugh, the Habs prospect, scored 2 goals, including a huge one in the third. Bedard only had 2 points, which was still a good night for him, but the way he'd been playing, it was nice to see other Canadian players step up and get the job done. I thought it was the best game of the tournament for 2023 draft-eligible Adam Fantilli. Fantilli's likely going to go either 2 or 3 behind Bedard in the draft. He scored a huge goal. Owen Beck, who got called up after the injury to Colton Dach, doesn't play much because, of course, he missed most of the tournament. Comes in late as a call-up. Seen, spare shifts, but he did pick up a big assist late in the game as well. Of course, Beck and Waugh are both Montreal Canadian prospects, both real solid players that look good for them down the road here. Brent Clark of the LA Kings prospect, of course, scored a big goal for Canada as well. So Canada goes on to play Czechia tonight. The game will get started here. By the time this makes it to YouTube, the game's probably going to be underway. The game starts in about 30 minutes time. I don't imagine I'll have this video, edit it, and post it before that gets underway. The U.S. played Sweden today for the bronze medal, and the United States did pull off the victory in a crazy game. It started off slow with not much scoring, good defensive play. In second period, things just exploded. Ended up 6-6. And then it's late in the game, the United States gets a power play, goes up 7-6. You think the United States has the win, but then Sweden ties it up with like 21 seconds left. 7-7, goes to overtime. But then American forward Chaz Lucius had a great game and finished off his hat trick for the win to secure the bronze medal for the United States. So it's certainly a great game from Logan Cooley, Lucius, and a few others there for the U.S. But certainly defensively, I tell you, it was not a good game for anybody. And Sweden goes home without a medal. It's unfortunate for them. The United States, I believe, picks up, they're done really well for at least getting a medal for quite a few years now. I'm sure they're disappointed with the color of the medal this year. Rick Dhaliwal and Elliot Friedman both talking about the Vancouver Canucks, talking about how they're likely going to be going down the road of some buyouts this offseason, assuming that some of these players may not be tradable. But I think a couple of candidates, even though they didn't mention them by name, appear to be guys like Tanner Pearson, maybe Tyler Myers. I know Friedman in the past has talked about the fact that he feels that there is a trade market for Myers, especially if you go into the offseason once his next year of his contract. I believe he has a signing bonus that's due, and it'll obviously eliminate the amount that's owing to him. And maybe Vancouver retains a little bit of salary, but expect the Canucks to likely be, aggressive to retool this roster here after we see what they do at the deadline. Could do additional moves in the summertime. Of course, as I mentioned as well, we have some other trade talk, including a handful of teams like the Anaheim Ducks. Could goaltender John Gibson be on the move? Ducks reporter Eric Stevens certainly feels like it would be the right time for a John Gibson trade. Of course, the Ducks are really, if we didn't know if they're going to be deep into a rebuild, we definitely know now. This is going to be a long haul for them. They're certainly going to be in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes this year. They do have some other young talent like Zegras, McTavish, Terry, a few others to build around, which makes sense. But it doesn't make sense to have a veteran guy like John Gibson. Obviously, there was a lot of speculation about him in the offseason. He seemed willing and able to want him to stay. But you have to wonder, all this losing probably getting to him, and it could be driving down his value too, which is certainly not great. But we saw earlier that young prospect goalie Lucas Dostal had a good chance to play, and he looked really good. He's a promising young potential goalie of the future for this franchise. They also have Anthony Stolarz on a more affordable contract, you could say. So ultimately, it could make Gibson tradable. Of course, John Gibson still has a number of years left in his contract, which might prove difficult to move given that his stats aren't the best considering the team he's playing on. But would there be a team that would want to swap goalies, maybe with another goalie that's either struggling as well, or to a team that certainly could find a way to make some upgrades? Looking at a team like maybe Edmonton or even their like the LA Kings, for example. Their goaltending's been questionable. Obviously they got Phoenix Copley holding things down right now, so I don't know if the Kings are confident in him as a long-term solution or not, but still lots of teams out there could benefit from a goalie like John Gibson. I know he does have a modified no trade, and there's certainly some control there that he would have to where he could go, but it certainly makes sense that the Ducks could explore this. If it's not something we see this year, wouldn't be shocking to see them maybe re-explore that in the offseason, but certainly it does make sense to me. But where do you think is a good landing spot for Gibson, and should the Anaheim Ducks go down that road? Now, yesterday we talked about a potential trade between the Maple Leafs and the Habs regarding defenseman Joel Edmondson. We know the Leafs are likely going to make probably 2 significant moves, or at least reasonably significant moves ahead of the deadline. They're likely going to add in the forward group somebody who can play top 9, top 6, and probably a top 4 or 5 defensemen as well. The defenseman's likely going to be somebody who can be a Jake Muzzin type, more of a stay-at-home guy, somebody who can be a little bit physical and just more defensive-minded. And another name that's been brought up by the fourthperiod.com and Dave Pagnora that they're also interested in to be considering, along with a guy like Edmondson, would be Gavrikov out of the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. Gavrikov is down to the final year of his contract. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. He's only making $2.8 million, so the cost is not high from that standpoint. But word is that guys like Edmondson and Gavrikov or David Savard out of Montreal, a few other guys around the league, their teams are looking for first-round picks for these guys. And a lot of that, I think, comes from the fact that we saw what Ben Chiarot got last year for the Montreal Canadiens under the Florida Panthers on that trade. That still seems to be like the bar that teams are going for, which to me seems awfully high, awfully rich. Once upon a time, you used to see defensemen go for maybe a mid-round pick or a prospect or something else. I don't know if the market's going to be quite that demanding this year, but that's where teams are at right now. The prices will likely change by the time we get to the deadline, assuming teams want to make a move. But personally, like I said before in yesterday's video, I don't see the Leafs wanting to move their first-round pick for this type of defenseman. I don't see them wanting to do it for Gavrikov, Edmondson, or any of these guys. So, I don't know that Kyle Dubas and the Leafs really want to move their first-round pick at all if they can help it. But if they do end up doing it, to me, it's going to be more for a top 6 forward to hopefully put them over the top, something they feel will help, push them deeper into the playoffs, and not the, stay-at-home defenseman that they'd probably rather pay a lot less for. So we'll see where that goes. But the Leafs are certainly got their eyes on a number of players around the league that they're looking at. And the other thing, too, to watch, which is going to be interesting, is Detroit and captain Dylan Larkin. Now, the Red Wings are not that far out of a playoff spot. They're within reach to the wild card. But as the season goes along here, if they're still, not looking like they're going to be a playoff team, you could see some more significant moves by Steve Yzerman. We saw him put Jacob Verana on waivers the other day. He's not afraid to be aggressive, not afraid to do what he feels is best for his hockey team on a long-term basis. Now, the Frank Saravalli and DailyFaceoff.com has a new article out talking about a lot of what he expects a lot of different teams to do down the stretch here heading towards the deadline. And mentioning Detroit, he says he sees them as a seller, and if they don't come to terms with Dylan Larkin on a new contract, he says they're very likely to trade him so they don't lose him for nothing as an unrestricted free agent in the summertime. I mean, Michigan is where Larkin is from. He's been a Red Wing his entire career, former first-round pick, current captain, arguably the team's best player. They do have some young players that are like Mo Seider, which is certainly could challenge that title, I guess, but still, he's pretty important there. And, I guess the Red Wings and Yzerman, I guess the big question here is they need to ask themselves is how important is too important to overpay? At the end of the day, there's other contracts out there. We saw what Matthew Barzal got from the Islanders, for example, and a few other guys around the league. Obviously, he's got to decide where he wants to be. And certainly if they can't get him for the right price, it wouldn't shock me to see Yzerman make a move. Now, of course, at the same time, though, he's a player you just don't see anywhere else. It would be weird to think of Larkin in another organization. Like I said, he's born and brought up in the state of Michigan. Certainly a player that you expect to be a Red Wing for life, so to speak. And it just would be odd. Now, guys like Bertuzzi could be on the move. We obviously saw what happened with Verana. We're waiting for more information there. So, it's just a little surprising in a sense to read this, given that the Red Wings are not that far from the playoffs. Even goaltender Alex Nedeljkovic, his name has been brought up lately as well. So we'll have to see what happens. But do you see Yzerman trading Larkin if he's not signed by the deadline? Saravalli thinks that's something that's very likely that's going to happen. Do you agree with that? If so, where do you think he could end up? I would think that if he's on the market, it's going to impact the Canucks and Bo Horvat. I think they're going to probably get certainly a lot of interest from similar teams. So we'll see where this goes. I mean, I know a team like Carolina comes to mind because they never really replaced Vincent Trocheck, the number 2 center. It's believed that the Hurricanes are going to likely be aggressive at the deadline too. So I don't know. Could one of those two players end up in Carolina? That wouldn't shock me in the least. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.